have any problems with that, then now's your time to take yourself off camera or do what you need to do. So we now are recording, so we'll get started. So hello everybody, my name is Jenny Nelson. I lead digital at Newcastle City Council, and I'm joined today on our Moving Beyond HowBusyIsToon.com presentation with David. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm David Scott. I'm a researcher from a digital agency called Hedgehog Lab.
Great, thanks David. And David and I are going to be tag teaming through the presentation. So yeah, you get used to either one of us giving it the next slide, please, as we go through. So just a bit of housekeeping, obviously, if you could keep yourself on mute, that would be really helpful. And there will be time at the end for questions, but actually do put any comments or questions in the chat if you want as we're going through as well. Next slide, please. So again, we're recording. I've become a bit paranoid about letting people know that they are being recorded. And obviously we're doing this presentation on How Busy is Toon and moving on from How Busy is Toon, in addition to our normal show and tells to celebrate Digital Leaders Week 2021. So please do get involved in social. You can mention a number of different accounts there, or give us the hashtag How Busy is Toon. And it really helps to spread the word about what people are doing. And obviously there's loads of other really good content on the Digital Leaders website, so I'm sure you'll be sure to check out some of the presentations, and I certainly have as well. And obviously this presentation will be available on video as well for other people to watch at a later time. Next slide, please. So in terms of the approach for today's session, what we're going to do is recap on the original HowBusyIsToon.com product and the ongoing deployment of that. We're then going to spend more of the time talking about our phase 2 work, so the user research that David has been leading and the findings that we've had from that. And ultimately, I guess, let you know sort of where we are in terms of citizen-centered data sharing and what it is that we're going to do next. But first of all, let's recap and let's think back to blimey, what seems like a lifetime ago. May last year, lockdown, the first lockdown was starting to come to an end, and we really recognised that it was so important that we got people back to the city centre. So we knew from other sort of studies and research that had been undertaken that there was a lot of genuine concern that people were nervous about coming back in, but from a local authority perspective, from a business perspective, and from a city perspective, it was so important that we had to we did something to help people to come back to the city centre and to feel safe. And something that we are certainly not short of in Newcastle is data. We're very lucky to be home to the Urban Observatory, which is the largest source of real-time open data in Europe. So covering anything from football to air quality to traffic travel, noise, bee levels. So we have plenty of data. And actually, so our thoughts turn to, well, how can we share data to help people make informed decisions about visiting their town centre, coming back, helping them feel safe and encouraging economic renewal. Next slide, please, David. And what we started with, taking that very an initial high-level view, this is what we started with. And as a high-level, I wouldn't say it was MVP, but it wasn't far past MVP. And in time for the shops reopening, we presented back some of the data from the Urban Observatory to show people how busy it was on our main Northumberland Street shopping area using a traffic light form. And we also provided some basic car parking and busyness data as well. And next slide, please, David.
So I can pick this one up, Jenny. So just in terms of a bit of a recap of the research that we did in the first phase, it was a kind of a multi approach. So we did some quant and qual research where we sent out surveys to people, we interviewed people, and we also did a little bit of ethnographic research. And we were really just trying to understand what life was like before COVID, what it looked like now, and how people had been impacted. We heard a lot about kind of people's mental health and well-being, and what kind of precautions people were taking. And then we also talked to people about what we could do in terms of information that could help them to make better decisions about coming back into the city centre and safer decisions. And we spoke to people across generations. And what we found off the back of this research was essentially four main themes. So busyness was clearly something that people wanted to know more about, but lots and lots of the people we spoke to wanted to know how the COVID-19 restrictions were impacting their leisure time. So after lockdown, or the first lockdown, it felt like people really wanted to get back to a bit of normality, going to the pub, going shopping, that kind of thing. What we also found out was that people were concerned about other people's behaviour, and this kind of directly led into wanting information about how to travel safely on public transport. And then also they wanted clarity around all the different safety measures you'd see around city centres.
That was typical. I was on mute there. That was the first one. I try not to do that anymore. And actually what we were really fortunate with is that MHCLG recognised pretty early on that there was a genuine value in the work that we'd started doing, and actually funded us through the Digital Fund COVID-19 Challenge to work with Hedgehog Lab to develop that first iteration. And we got to the point where actually, we were very much focusing on, well, how could we scale up that MVP? How could we draw in the research that Hedgehog had done? And how could we share that with people as well? So actually, it was great timing that actually we had an idea and MHCLG were able to support us to do that. And it's been a bit, because of lockdown, it's been a bit sort of up and down, I guess over the year. But what we've been able to do is use the project in a sort of collaborative and agile way to continue to try and respond to needs that people are expressing, as they have done over the last year. And we're very much focused on, so how do we respond to user feedback, and how do we scale up and share the product that we've already delivered? And actually the customer feedback has been fantastic. It was really, really positive at the outset with the MVP. And since reopening in April, we've been able to track some excellent sort of usefulness ratings of above 90%. And actually what people really like about the site are the real-time images, pictures of the city, and they want more of that. So we're collecting more information about what is it that people want to see on the site. They want more cameras, they want more information, and particularly they want more real-time information as well. Next slide, please, David. But as I say, what we're also trying to do is to encourage not just use within Newcastle, increased use within Newcastle and increased value, but also supporting deployment by other people as well. So what we've developed is an onboarding guide, which helps talk you through, I suppose, the process of what you can do with How Busy Is Toon, and the different things that you can get from that. And actually, not just as a product, but as a concept. So this whole work that we're trying to do and working in a very sort of open way and sharing that had been useful for other places who have been considering how do they show this type of data. So we've been working with Essex and Hert's Digital Innovation Zone, who are looking at a more like-for-like version of the product. And we've been working with North Tyneside Council, who are taking some of the technology and understanding how they can apply that in their area. And we've also been talking with Leeds as well, who have taken a very different approach in terms of the technology, but actually that we've still been able to share experiences around it. It reinforces that there is a user need there and that there is an interest in this type of data being shared. And certainly it was really sort of obvious towards the start of this year that both with the product development and improving the current site as is and increasing the reuse, that there was more to do and there was more sort of appetite, and how do we build on that customer feedback. And we were really fortunate to get MHCLG continuation funding to take us into phase 2. And that's what we're going to really focus on for the rest of the project. So the rest of the presentation rather. So David, I'll hand back over to you.
Yes, so thanks, Jenny. So I guess quickly touching on kind of the project as a whole, I guess the overall objective was for us to be able to share data to help people make informed decisions about visiting their town or city centre, to help them feel safe and then encourage that economic renewal. And what we know from phase 1 research is that people had concerns around public transport. So this is where we kind of centered our research this time around. So we wanted to know more about what people needed to know in relation to helping them feel safe to return to pre-pandemic public transport choices. And we also explored a little bit around kind of the positive changes we'd seen that people had built during the pandemic. So again, in this phase of the research, we took a multi kind of approach. There was a mix of qual and quant. So we conducted surveys again. This time around, we got 315 surveys, and they were from across the UK. And we used a platform called SurveyMonkey, which got the responses. But then we also spoke to a group of respondents, again, across generations, to understand in a bit more depth about what they thought and what they were thinking. What we, in addition, got them to do this time around was to collect ethnographic evidence for us. So we asked the guys that we worked with if they would essentially take us on a journey with them. And we got them to film their journey from traveling into the city centre or potentially using a cycle around the city. And they showed us kind of any points of interest. So whilst we got a lot of data off the back of the surveys, we also managed to get some kind of real life footage, which really helped in understanding what the needs were. So in terms of what we explored, well, we looked at what people's primary mode of transport was before the pandemic. We talked about how they travelled now and why that had potentially changed if it had. We asked people what their intentions were around once the restrictions are lifted, and how satisfied they currently are with their current mode of travel. We asked them how they planned their journeys. So do they use any online tools? What sort of information do they need? And then, as I mentioned, we talked about kind of the environment and how that impacts on the choices that people make. Now, we know that car usage has decreased during the pandemic, but pre-pandemic levels are returning. And 52% of the people we surveyed said they'll use their car again as the primary mode of transportation once restrictions have been lifted. And I think safety really plays a key role in this. Here's a quote here from a Gen X respondent saying, "I'll use my car as I prefer not to be around so many people who may have COVID-19. We've got another quote here from a baby boomer respondent saying they're more concerned with their own safety than their environment. And then again, a quote here from a Silent Gen respondent that we worked with that mentioned that they're in their 70s and this is the most convenient way of transport for us. And standing at a cold and windy bus stop is not for them. So we heard a lot about how safety played a driver in people choosing their car as their primary mode of travel. But we also know that there are other convenience factors that come into play when considering, say, public transport. So some of the key themes that came out in the phase 2 research here, well, public transport still has a PR problem. Interestingly, people who had stopped using it are most concerned. So those guys who had potentially used public transport and then stopped using it during the pandemic were the ones that were concerned about starting to use it again. But interestingly, people who had to use public transport throughout and hadn't kind of worked from home, so had to continue to use buses, trains on a daily basis, said that they still felt safe using them, but they were mindful of busyness levels impacting how safe they felt. Again, we also discovered a number of issues with public transport that existed pre-pandemic. So we know that there are a number of variables that make it tricky for people to navigate public transport in a way that kind of feels convenient for them. So we're looking at things here like ticketing, cost, different operators, reliability. So these were problems that existed before COVID-19, and they haven't gone anywhere. They're still here and they're not easy to solve without the input of multiple organisations all kind of sharing data with one common objective. And then if we look at sustainability, people are thinking about sustainability, but at the moment it's not top of the agenda and safety really comes first. So we've seen an increase in people adopting active travel as their primary mode of transport during the pandemic. However, our survey results suggest that the numbers of people who intend to keep that up once restrictions are lifted are limited. And for many people, what they've told us is they can only take up kind of realistic, sustainable travel options if they're available to them. So many people are in places where the location doesn't allow for, the use of cycles or cycle rental or e-scooters. So that all plays a part in people being able to make these choices. So when it comes to, I guess, the user needs when it comes to public transport and enabling people to return to making safe public transport choices. What they told us is they want that convenience to get from A to B. They want to be able to access, they want easily accessible information to help them plan journeys in advance. They want kind of reliable, cost-effective public transport, and they also want to feel safe when they're using it. So we looked at, I guess when we looked at all of the data and all the evidence that we'd found, we asked ourselves these three questions throughout. So is this user need met by somebody else already? Can we improve on this user need, and why does this need still exist? And some of the conclusions to these questions that we came to were, well, traditional travel operators are releasing tools to help with the need of safety, and that's in addition to the actual safety measures that they're taking on the buses and the trains. So Trainline and Go Northeast, for example, both have features within apps that allow people to see how busy their services are. They can see kind of literally the next train or the next bus that's coming up. So there are tools out there that people can use to deal with the issue of safety. Citymapper and other such apps are addressing the planning needs that we discovered. However, we found that awareness is low, or in the case of Citymapper, in some cities across the UK, all of the features that people are asking for are just not rolled out right now, but they're coming. And then in terms of the sustainability and tools that will allow people to plot routes, that type of thing, well, as I'm sure everybody knows, there's a big active travel community with apps such as Strava, and you can do a lot of the things that people were telling us that they wanted to be able to do. So after much discovery and ideation, we'd reached a point in the project where it felt like there was no obvious standout need that's not already been addressed. And then in terms of some of the infrastructure needs regarding pricing, timetables, reliability, well, we can't control those needs right now. And also, finally, the national position around public transport in terms of the roadmap is also not set in stone yet. So I'll pass back over to Jenny.
Yeah, and I've just published a blog on this as well about how it felt to be in that position. So, we were really grappling with, okay, this is great, and it's great that we've understood the user needs and we've taken all of that time for discovery, but actually where do we add value? Because actually the original How Busy is Toon felt really clear. We had the data, we had a need, we're going to try this. And this felt a bit more like, oh, what are we doing? Where can we add the most value? So we really needed to take a step back and say, well, hang on, are there other user needs that we haven't considered? So we very much focused on the end user. Actually, is there something about cities? Is there something about businesses? And actually, what about really sort of, again, not just focusing our attention on public transport, but just taking that higher level view on mobility and travel data in general, and are there other things that we can do around that? And after more research and more kind of reflection, we didn't find anything specific from businesses. So when we were looking at those other user needs, yet other than a feeling that people felt sharing real-time data was a good thing, we didn't get anything that said, you should share X, Y, and Z, and that's what people are looking for. On the opposite side, we did a survey of a number of cities, so I guess people in similar kind of roles to myself, and that was a really sort of different picture, that cities felt strongly that there was a role for them in supporting making open data available to drive economic recovery, to drive innovation, and to drive sustainability. And actually that was endorsed by a couple of other interviews that we did with policymakers who felt that while yes, Google and Citymapper and the like clearly have a role in how some of that data is presented, actually it shouldn't just be on them to do that. So there was a role for cities, and some cities were already doing that. And we did have a look at a number of different examples of what people were doing in different areas. And what did we find? So what we found is that real-time data on travel and transport is not presented through these types of sites. So we're not going to go into the detail of all of the different sites that we looked at, but you can find that on our project homepage, which has all of our other links to show and tells. But essentially what you will see is that most of these sort of city data sites, city data platforms, offer either the raw data to download, so perhaps an Excel file, But some of them do take a different approach and try some level of visualization of the data, so showing that in map format, or as a blog, so trying to give some context, I guess, to the data as well. But certainly, we weren't seeing this sort of real-time travel and transport data shown on those sites. And also in terms of the site, it wasn't always clear who the audience was for the sites, and nor could we really get a handle on how well used they were, or where the value was being added, and who was the end user, and how were they benefiting from that, beyond perhaps the city feeling that actually, well, we're doing a good thing because we're presenting this in the first place.
So, given what we'd found when we looked at these city sharing sites, the general focus seemed to be on static and not real-time data. So we started to wonder, well, where can you find that data? Here you can see just an example of the Bus Open data service. And what we've seen is that some people are using this data, which is available, and they are doing stuff with it. This is a site called bustimes.org, and it pulls from the BODS data and other sources, but it allows users to see in real time the buses that are in their area, and them also moving around in real time. And you can even kind of see, if you click on specific buses, whether they've got USB power, if they're step free. So you can find out quite a bit of information from this. There's also a site here called Northeast Traffic, and they use traffic cams, much like the cameras that we have on the existing How Busy Is Toon site. So it gives users kind of an indication as to how busy the traffic is throughout the city. And here is another example of bus tracking, and this time it's for the West Midlands, and this uses data that precedes BODS, and it's primarily aimed at policymakers. Finally, the UTMZ Open Data Service provides travel and traffic related data sets through API, and this pulls into some other sites that we've also been looking at as well. So Jenny, I'll pass back to you.
So I think having, I guess, gone the long way around, to where this leaves us. So we've looked at public transport, we've looked at needs and wants around that, we've looked at how cities provide data, we've looked at where real-time traffic and transport data is being provided, and what has that led us to? Where are we at right now? And I think we are confident that users, based on the research that we've done throughout, we are confident that users want real-time data, which shows, helps them and gives them a convenient way of seeing and accessing that information. And as David said, we have cameras that we can show, similarly to the way that we did with busyness and How Busy Is Toon. We also know that cities are trying their best, and they want to show real-time data to meet a number of different objectives. And obviously part of that is about enabling that easier access for businesses and app developers and Google and Citymapper and the like. And I think similar to that, it's clear that Google, Citymapper and the like, existing consumer products do exist in which some real-time data is shared. But actually not all of the real-time data that's available, and actually where that is presented isn't necessarily presented with the consumer in mind. And none of this is about us going head to head with consumer apps. There's a clear role for consumer consumption, and there's a role for us in helping to facilitate that. But it's also about, similar to how we saw with How Busy Is Toon, how do we this isn't always about, How Busy Is Toon wasn't about telling people an exact time to come into the city centre. So it wasn't, you wanted to come into the city centre at 11:05 a.m. Actually, this isn't about route planning on a similar note. It's about sharing data and encouraging that open data and giving that data to people, and not determining at the outset what they then choose to do with that. So actually, the parallels with the original How Busy Is Toon have started to get a bit stronger. There is obviously also other real-time data that we'd like that isn't available yet, and we'd love to do something that encourages more people to share real-time open data when people can see the benefits, and actually that we're lifting the lid on that consumer want and the user need to access that. And clearly, we also really want to continue to support that sort of sustainability element and the green thread. How do we, this isn't just about making it easier for people to travel in their cars, but it does recognise that people will travel in their cars. So how do we share data with people in a way that gives them what they need, but also perhaps nudges that sustainability element as well? So what next?
So I'll pick this up, Jenny. So in terms of where we are, what you're looking at here is some very early, I guess, design thinking around the information that we could present on the How Busy Is Toon site, and we even sort of had a conversation around, is this a standalone offering, or does this fit back on How Busy Is Toon? But you can see here. How busy are the roads? How busy is my bus? Or where is my bus? Sorry. Could we introduce kind of real time the car parking data, which is already on there? But could we also introduce EV charging? Is there any information that we could pull in about kind of train and light rail information? And also that nudge messaging that Jenny was talking about before. Could we kind of encourage people, if it's looking like the roads are busy or they're potentially their bus is late? Could we encourage people to maybe take up cycling or walking? It's a different option. So what you're about to see here now is some very kind of quick and dirty, just rough mock-ups of how some of these features could potentially be introduced into the current How Busy Is Toon site. So we could kind of raise awareness of the new sections with a banner on the homepage. We could start to introduce the new categories down the left-hand side of navigation. So existing users will be familiar with this already. We can also then bring in these camera views to show how busy the roads are, and to give people that indication if they're coming in and maybe they want to kind of take up, walking into town or cycling if possible. And again, the live bus tracker information that we talked about, could we introduce this here as well? So these are just, as I say, very quick and dirty mock-ups of what this could potentially look like. But we're now at a point where we are starting to look at the real design of these features and how they'll be integrated into the How Busy Is Toon site. And also we're looking at the data that's available and how we will be able to best use that. And from there, we will start to talk to users about what they want to see and how useful these new features are as part of ongoing user testing.
So I'm really excited about where we've got to, and as I say, I think it's been worth taking that time for discovery to focus on exactly where we do think we can add the value. And I think what we've shown through the original How Busy Is Toon and through this is that there is lots of data out there in lots of different places. It isn't always presented with the consumer in mind or an end user in mind. How do we bring that into a place that's useful for consumers, that is good for cities because it shows that they're being proactive in doing that makes it easy for the big leading consumer products or others to get a hold of the data, and generally encourages that overall awareness. And I mean, I think David finds it quite funny that I'm absolutely overwhelmed by the bus times website. I just find it so amazing that you can see all of the buses moving around in that way. And actually that ties back to some of the feedback we had on the original How Busy Is Toon, is that people who don't interact with data on a day-to-day basis are not going to go and seek it out from perhaps a website that they're not familiar with, or an academic research site or something like that. We need to make it easy for people to see, and actually people are blown away by the amount of data that's there, and then the fact that they're then able to use that in a way that's useful for them is just really exciting. And I think I can't wait to see where we get to, and I'm sure that there's even more that we can bring in, and more that it will apply in other cities as well, who have access to different types of data as well. So if you want to, you can stay involved and see how we get on by joining us at future sessions. So we do have regular show and tells. We also have our project homepage website, which you can see on there, where we've got a number of blogs, and obviously we've got the onboarding guide as well, and the code for the existing site. I've also put that in the chat so people can have a look, and please do give us some feedback. We would absolutely love you to take, as I say, either the product or the concept and the learning, and think about this in your town or city. How is the data in your town or city that you can share with people that would be useful for them and that would meet a user need? So please do get in touch, either on Twitter or through the website, and we would love you to stay involved. And like to just say at this point a big thank you again to MHCLG, and in particular Egley Shaw, our collaboration manager, for her ongoing support in terms of agile delivery and just making sure all of the time that we keep coming back to user needs. I think there's been a few times where through the process we felt like we just wanted to deliver a solution and we just wanted to come up with a solution, and actually Egley's been really good in sort of pulling us back to, well, what are the user needs that you're addressing. So that's been absolutely critical to the success of the programme, so thank you MHCLG and Egley in particular, and of course David. And that is it from us. If anybody has any questions, now's your time to ask or pop them in the chat. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Just pop your hand up if you want to, or come off mute. Nope, I don't think we've got any questions. That's great. Well, as I say, the session will be recorded. The session had been recorded and will be available if you want to encourage any colleagues to watch it as well. But otherwise, thank you very much from David and myself.